Lauren Jones, thank you so much for being here. If somebody just opened up this YouTube video and they're like, I hope it's one of those ones where they just start telling me things immediately and I'm not just sitting there being like, oh my God, why is every video I have to wait until they tell me something? Just tell us right now, if somebody wanted to be a photographer in 2022, would you say like, yeah, chase your dream? Or would you be like, no, stop?
Yes, I think you should. Honestly, now more than ever, it's a very viable career.
So we can do an episode talking about it.
Let's do it.
Let's do an episode talking about being a freelance photographer. Awesome. Let's go. Okay. I honestly think you're incredible. You started out, you didn't have any of this handed to you. You had to figure out how to develop not only your talent, what your voice is going to be, which we're going to talk about, but how you were going to get clients and how to make this full-time, which now you are full-time doing this. You are a commercial fashion photographer first and foremost, and you have had been able to work with brands like Adidas, JanSport, Glossier. Like, you're doing things. Lauren Jones is doing things.
My hype man.
Yeah, which I love. So we're going to talk as if we're talking to the youngest version of you that first realized they started to feel like an affinity towards their camera and towards people that are also out there that are at the beginning of their journey. And they're like, can I get some tips on this? How's that sound, Lauren Jones?
That sounds great.
Okay, awesome. This whole time there will be these beautiful photos of your work that we've selected that's showing up on the YouTube. So if you just like glance over, you can appreciate some of your work.
Wow.
Okay, so let's start with a question I feel like everybody wants to know, everybody's always talking about, especially now, which is really basic. It's equipment. You know, we've seen it like blow up. That whole world's blown up, and then smartphones entered into it as well. So I think a lot of people are sitting there being like, okay, but what camera do I need? I'm sure you get this all the time. Like, what's your response?
Yeah, and that's such a loaded question because I feel like if you are just starting and you're like, I don't know if I'm going to even be good at this. I don't know if this is going to be my career, but I just want to kind of get started. You don't need a nice camera. Like, I feel like everyone thinks that they need something big and fancy, and you just don't. I think a lot of people compensate for their skill by getting so much gear, and like they get these like massive lenses and they have like all these camera bodies, and that's just, at least to me, that's not what it's about. You know, it's about honing in like your knowledge of the camera and what you even like to photograph and your, you know, knowledge behind the camera. You know, it's just not about this big fancy gear. I think there's a time and place to get all the fancy gear, you know, when is needed. But I mean, when I started, I just borrowed cameras. Like, I was very lucky that my mom was actually a photographer. She still is a photographer. So I just kind of like took that for granted. I just always like played around with her cameras. But yeah, you don't need fancy stuff until you need fancy stuff.
I love that. That's a great mantra. You don't need fancy stuff until you need fancy stuff.
Yeah, I mean, that's just a good motto in life.
I really like that as an answer. So don't get too caught up on figuring out that you need to buy a certain high-end camera and then, oh my God, now you need the lens as well because the lens is this, and then you need the lighting. Just start with what you can get your hands on.
Yeah,
even
just
if
try
what
to
is
like
in your hand is on your phone.
Exactly. Like, go ask your uncle if he has that camera laying around his attic. Like, he probably does, you know? Like, I think as long as it's not a point and shoot. So point and shoots, you can't change the settings. Where a DSLR, you can change the settings and you can take the lens off. I think that's like the only distinction. If you actually are trying to get into photography, don't just get, you know, like a little point and shoot, like pocket sized camera. Actually get one that you can take the lens off, you can change the settings, because then you can actually start to learn the settings.
So since we're already talking about this younger version of you that was going and playing with your mom's cameras, and like you're talking about, instead of just me point and clicking, I'm done. Oh my God, wait, there's actually like dials and buttons and things that are like letting more light in or like speeding up the camera. Like, okay, take us back. I'm going to tell you right now, just this hypothetical that like little baby Lauren is playing with her mom's camera for the first time and clicks open to YouTube and sees future Lauren talking to her. what are just a few things you would want to tell that young version of you now, having gone through this, about this journey that you're going to go on?
Great question. Well, I guess this isn't like a typical journey. Maybe people would find this encouraging, but I could not have cared less about photography until probably 6 years ago. Like, little Lauren was like, I don't want to do that. Like, that's what my parents do. Like, I want to be an artist, you know, like I want to paint, or I want to be an actress or a dancer. Like, I was not interested in photography, and it honestly kind of like, I don't want to say fell into my lap, because it was always there. It was like, photography has always been in sort of like the background of my life, but never something I thought I wanted to pursue. So yeah, I mean, maybe I kind of take that for granted that it was just there. That's why I didn't even notice, like, oh, this is something I could really enjoy and be good at. So I guess sort of my advice is like, it's never too late to find out what you're really passionate about, and, you know, never take for granted where life takes you, because it all sort of adds up. You know, like, I was in the modeling industry when I was younger, and I was way more interested in like the camera side of things. Like, oh, like, look at this lighting, look at this art direction, this like styling. Like, I was like, okay, modeling is kind of cool, but like, I just liked being in that environment, you know, and, you know, seeing my mom in that environment. And then eventually I thought, oh, maybe I want to be a stylist or an art director, because I wanted to be on these sets with these, you know, fashion models and fashion photographers. And I just love the whole scene. And that's kind of how I got started. And then I was like, okay, this is kind of fun, but like, I want to take control of this whole scene. And how do I do that? Like, how do I take this vision to the final step? And that's me taking the photo, you know, like having that vision, taking the photo to the final step. So yeah, that's kind of what I would tell a younger version of myself, or a younger version of someone that wants to get into it. Like, yeah, it's never too late to sort of figure out what you're really passionate about. I mean, I was, yeah, like I said, like 5 or 6 years ago is really when I got into photography.
I love that I freaking love that. You're basically like, listen, this actually is like, will be incredibly fulfilling and will activate you, and you will love this, even if you're like, oh my God, I would not love this. And I think that's cool, because any artist could be watching a video like this and they've thought of themselves as a writer. You know, maybe they'll be a director one day. Maybe they want to have all these different ways to express art. And that's what I think is really so interesting about photography and videography being a very, very modern invention, coupled with all of these art forms that have been around forever, right? When it comes to painting or writing, we're throwing in a lot of these elements into one. So if it's like you said, there's really a lot of chance there's all types of artists that are coming to photography, never thinking that they ever would end up there. And it might end up being this thing that activates this artist within them that they had just always kind of pigeonholed into this painting.
Exactly. Yeah. You just have to be, as an artist, just be open-minded to what, you know, I truly feel like one medium leads itself to another medium of art. You know, like, if you are like honing in on your painting skills, that could eventually make you a better photographer. Like, I know that sounds kind of woo-woo, but like, it's so true. Like, becoming a better photographer could make you a better writer, like make you a better director. Like, you just really never know. Like, it's all just so fluid and just flows into each other. So just, I mean, being in, you know, in the arts in general is helpful no matter what sort of career you end up going into. Just being open. This
is great. I'm just going to share this with all my friends that are artists that haven't picked up a camera, and this is going to be like a way for them to like now go on their own like camera journey to inform them. I'm serious. I think it's a really great answer. I freaking believe that. Okay.
Yes.
I love that. We just like talked to baby Lauren,
Yay.
Who's like, nah, my mom does that.
You never want to do what your parents do, you know?
Right. No, God, do I know that? Okay, so I am curious, would you tell them to follow the same path? And I don't mean this to be one of those like tricky questions where it's like, do you have regrets? It's not really about that. It's if, you know, the path that you took to get where you are now, where you have your own business and you have clients and you're really feeling fulfilled. Is there slight differences that if you could go back, you'd be like, oh, maybe get to this place sooner, or maybe skip this way of getting how I got there? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I'll answer, and if I'm answering a different question, let me know. I think one, I don't think you need to go to college for photography, hot take. But that's besides the point. I didn't go to college for photography. I have a graphic design degree. And
by the way, that is
just, like,
such a cool answer that I want, like, I'm going to have like After Effects and like lights going off anytime it answers that you don't need to go to college, because we had the same thing happen in our haircutting or hairstyling episode. It's like, I love that. Tell me more.
Well, and like for like my friends that did go for photography, like it's already changed. Like we're not even that old, and technology changed. Sure, you can learn like some fundamental like lighting principles, but even, you know, sort of like some older school photographers I learned from, those techniques, I'm not using any of those. You know, it's like this like hard gritty flash that's, you know, so popular right now. Like we would never learn that in school. Like they would be like, we would get an F if we use like a hard flash in school, you know? So it's like,
wow,
it's sort of like one of those artist principles is like learn the rules so you know how to break them kind of thing. But I don't think you need to go to college for it. So I didn't go to college for it. I have a graphic design degree. And what I would recommend before going full freelance is getting some sort of stable-ish job in the field or in the industry. And that has just been my experience. I know plenty of photographers that didn't do that, you know, whether it's like, oh, you're a photographer for a marketing team or an ad agency or a creative agency, or even like, oh, I'm the photographer for a boutique, like a local boutique, and I do all their social media, I do all their, you know, in-house photos, like just something to sort of get you established, you know, start networking, have something semi-stable before you go full freelance. Because I was a full-time photographer at a creative agency. That's actually how I met Charlie. And I mean, I have that company to thank for still a lot of my clients. And I just I had the space to learn a ton while I was there and get good, like, you know, learn lighting, learn retouching. And then I was able to go out on my own and have that sort of like foundation. Does that make sense?
I absolutely. I told you, you know, when I go into these, I'm a bit of a nerd, and I watch hours of other photographers on YouTube that are teaching so that I can try to not just retread or challenge things or bring a different thing that's not just already existing in a really great way on the internet. So that there was a big conversation about that. So you informing that is really, really helpful, because I do, some of the people that I like the most, they did also take that take of like, you know, ideally you are having something else that is helping you from, you know, some other job, and then you can build up and use that. And the companies that I've started in my life were, I was able to start them because I had a dependable, secure position, even though I didn't necessarily love every day what I was doing with my full-time job. It was creating the ability for me to, at home and on the weekends, come up with what I was going to do next.
Exactly. And I mean, and maybe, you know, your full-time gig isn't in photography, you know, it's
right.
You could be working a 9 to 5 at, you know, you could be a nurse, like you could be, you know, a marketing person. It doesn't have to be photography. I think it's ideal if it is, so you are sort of like learning on the job, you know, but as long as you have something stable, I guess what I'm saying is like, don't just like go quit your job and then learn photography. Like have a nice foundation, know a lot, like you're never going to feel fully ready, but as ready as you can feel.
Completely. I love that. Should we have like I put like a nice little Focus Lab shout out here with their Instagram definitely. And like a heart emoji. We can do that.
No,
cool.
We should do that. Perfect.
Okay. So you actually answered a couple of my questions, which is great. We're like just moving right along, which makes me really happy.
I knew that would happen.
So let's do a fun one. At least it's fun for me anytime that people ask me about influences or people that I keep in check with now that inspire me. Like if you asked me this past week, I could go for the next 15 minutes about how much I enjoyed the first season of Hacks on HBO that I watched last week.
Love.
So, yeah.
Yes. So more people need to know about that show.
So good. Okay, so we're having a whole side moment, so I apologize, audience, but I'm not kidding. I actually cried in the finale of season 1 Hacks. Like I was watching it and I was tearing up watching it. I thought it was so good.
Yeah, I get it. It's so good.
Thank you. Thank you for validating that in me. All right. So your resources, influences, people that you like to keep an eye on, or people that have had an impact on your work.
Yeah. I mean, it's a loaded question because there are people there's a couple photographers who are sort of like, let's say a couple steps ahead in their career. And I kind of like look to them, even like just little things, I'm like, okay, like what does their website look like? I want mine to make sure it's, in line. Like I'm not doing something totally different than theirs. I don't want to copy it. And even like, how on Instagram, like some people, their Instagram is so cohesive. Like they all do like the white borders or they don't do the white borders. I like look to these two photographers. One, her name is Emma Crafts, and the other one is Kelia Ann. They both actually graduated from SCAD, which is where I went to school. So they're just, they're not like photographer influencers by any means, but they're just like incredibly brilliant photographers that are, I would say, a few years ahead of me in their career. So I sort of like look to them just for that sort of guidance. And then another photo duo I really, really like is Weekend Creative, and they are amazing photographers, but also photo educators. So they have a lot of online education resources that a lot of it's free. Some of it you can pay for. I mean, down to like how to write a proposal, how to write a budget, and, how to negotiate with your clients. Like some of that like nitty gritty business stuff, but also a lot of like, inspiration type stuff. And so again, that's Weekend Creative, and that's a great tool if you're just starting out and you're like, I want to do product photography. I don't even know where I start. Like a really, really strong resource.
That's perfect. And we'll have those links thrown up on the screen and in the description.
Perfect.
So people like, as you're talking about them, can be like, oh, I should pause this real quick and actually open this up and throw it a follow. Awesome.
Perfect.
Okay. All right. I've got a fun question. At least I think it's fun. Videography. You start to put a certain amount of hours into photography. What's your take or your thoughts on that kind of curiosity and question about branching out and trying to master or play with that other art form with your camera?
Yeah. It's a tricky question because this is just how I feel about it. I think other photographers feel differently, but I guess I have this like eye roll when people say like, oh, can you do video too? Like I get clients asking that all the time because video is like it now, on Instagram. Like no one wants still photos anymore. They want videos. Like TikTok's a big thing. But for me, I'm like, it's just not realistic for me to do both. And I think it's okay to say that, I always recommend videographers, I'm like, awesome, perfect. I would love for you to have video on this project. Here's a videographer you can hire. Because just, when it comes down to like lighting, like the entire lighting setup changes when you need video.
That's profoundly interesting for me, but somebody that understands that lighting is obviously important, but hadn't actually thought about that. Well then you're completely changing everything.
Yeah. So, I shoot, this is kind of like getting in the weeds of, photography, but I use strobes. And so every time I click my camera,
take us into the weeds, Lauren Jones. Give us the download on lighting.
Weeds.
Lighting is, I think there's certain things, if you can go on YouTube, you can just watch like an hour of photographers just talking about lighting. So we don't have to do that. Oh, yeah. But give me a little.
Yeah. And I think a lot of clients don't understand this. So they just think like, oh yeah, like you can just show up and do both. But I use strobes. So when I click my camera trigger, the light goes off, like, it's like a half a second. Where, with video, like if we're both photographing the same model and there's just like all these flashes for video, that's not good. That's not helping. So you have to use continuous lighting. So continuous lighting just means light that's continuously on. So like light that's on the whole time. And those are just completely different lights. It's a different setup. There's different modifiers. So it's very doable. I've been on a lot of film sets where it's like video is the primary. So I'm just sort of shooting whatever they set up. And that's, it is what it is. So yeah, that's kind of my take. I think nowadays there just are a lot more photographers and videographers on the scene, so they just expect us to be able to do it all. And I don't know, I really feel like, you know, you could go either way. You could be sort of like that new photographer video duo that you can do both. But I feel like I'm just very passionate about photo and not passionate about video at all. And I think that's okay. Like, you can put your, you know, you can draw a line in the sand, be like, this is me, this is what I do, or not do.
I just want to affirm all of that. I think that stopping, and anytime you're hearing something that says actually no, or actually it's okay to not, is harder to find nowadays, because we do have I feel like there's a tendency to feel like we need to say yes, and we have to try to fit in, and we have to include all these elements. So no, I think that's really good advice. It might be really, really nice for somebody to hear and feel like almost like you're giving them a hug and be like, if that's not what you're passionate about, that's maybe like a really good thing, and you should listen to that.
And I will tell you, I've never had a client like turn me down because I said I didn't do video. I've never had a client say, oh, actually, we don't want to work with you now. We're going to go find someone that does both. Never. I've either had them say, perfect, we'll bring a videographer on. Like, we'll make the budget work to hire a videographer. Or they'll say, oh, all good, we'll just do a separate project for that down the road. So,
do you know what that was, Lauren?
What?
That was really good advice.
We try. Okay, wait, something else I want to touch on here with please. Like saying no. Is I do feel like when you start out, you feel like you have to be good at everything. And what I mean by that is, when you start out, you think you need to shoot weddings, you need to shoot product photography, you need to shoot seniors and children and fashion. And it's like, I think when you do start out, it's fun to sort of tap into all those different markets and just see what you even like. But for a long time, you know, when I was like fully in my career, I thought I needed to be an incredible product photographer and an incredible like portrait photographer. And I would say maybe 2 years ago, I just said, I am not a great product photographer. Like, I am not the person you call to shoot like little still lifes of like beauty still lifes, you know, or like food photography exclusively. Like, what I'm great at is anything with people. Even if there's like a hand in there, that's what I'm good at, you know, a hand or just a smile or just an arm. Like, you know, and I just said, you know what, someone else is really good at that, and I'm going to let them have that work. And the work I'm really passionate about usually has a human or a human element in there, and that's okay.
That was actually one of my last questions. So like we are killing it. It was how important, so you can add on to this if you would like, if you want to add anything to it, but how important and clarifying it was for you to discover that you're like, wait, I have more of a voice here, a niche, something specific that I'm starting to understand and starting to piece together. I imagine that was a significant step for you.
I would say, and I think I was just like beating myself up for not being great at like strictly product photography. And I was just like, this should look better than it looks, you know? But then I shoot, you know, I photograph a human and I'm like, oh, I'm brilliant. Like, this is so good, you know? And this is just like so comfortable and inspiring to me. And then someone feels that exact way, but about product photography, you know? Some people are like, I do not want to work with people. I don't want to talk to people. I don't want to direct people. I'm awkward. Like, so that's someone else's like super strong point. So yeah, it was definitely a very, very like freeing realization. And to sort of your point, I'm in this interesting world of like, like finding your voice in the photo world. Because people come to you for a certain style. So I always tell people, I will photograph whatever your brand is or whoever you are, as long as you dig my style. So like, I will shoot for a plant company, or I'll shoot for a backpack company or a tech company, as long as you dig what I'm bringing to the table and sort of like my style, I'll shoot whatever. So it's almost like less of a specific like niche. Like, you know, some people only do in studio fashion photography or tech photography. Like I do it all as long as it's in a certain style. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And it makes this a much more unique and valuable interview that we're doing, right? Because you're not saying, here's how I do all my wedding photography. Here's how I do all of my XYZ, right? To open up and say, I'm discovering my voice, I'm discovering my vision, and I have such a love for it, and it's expanding and it's getting better. And I'm willing to apply that to a lot of different things as long as we're on the same page and I'm not compromising what I know I see here and what I want to do with it. I think that's very important to say. And also, like, it makes me excited for you. I think that's just so cool because you kind of get to increase the opportunities to challenge yourself and do new things, but without having to, like I said, compromise what you know you love.
Yeah, like it takes me to so many cool places and cool industries that I never would have learned about. Like I was just on set with this tech company that was like photographing a bunch of like engineers with circuit boards and like all like this whole industry I had no idea was even a thing. And I got to like immerse myself in this world and photograph them, but in my own way. Or like I got to shoot for this like cannabis tech company that was just like so cool, so fun. And I never thought like with my style that those brands would hire me, but it's happening.
I love it. I love it. Okay, that's so cool. And of course you answered more questions, which makes me like super happy. I think there's a lesson here maybe to put a cap on this whole like, you know, finding out what your style is and what you like to do. I think there's a lesson here that I'm taking, which is that you kind of really need to learn how to listen to yourself and to trust yourself, because you were having moments where you're like, this doesn't look good. But then you'd have moments where you're like, this is good what I did. And I think there's probably like some serious, like, can't be discounted how important it could be internally to start to trust yourself and to listen to yourself when you're getting into this early, to be like, wait, you're actually, you yourself are probably telling yourself, even if it's like subconscious, exactly what you need to be listening to and following.
Yeah. I mean, no, you nailed it. Like just follow what you actually like. You know, like it's honestly that simple. Like just keep shooting what makes you happy or you're inspired by, even if you're like, how is this going to be marketable? How am I going to sell this? Like figure that out later. Like just start shooting what you really enjoy or inspires you.
Okay. So a huge question that's like on all the YouTubes and all the articles that I was reading, everybody's like asking, how am I supposed to use or regard my social media as I'm building out like my portfolio or I'm doing business. So just in general, kind of what starts coming to mind when people are asking you about, you know, social media related to what you do?
Yeah, I mean, great question. And again, it's so different for every person. I think for me, Instagram is definitely important. And, you know, I definitely had to make a shift from my Instagram used to be very personal, just like me posting, me doing fun things. And now it's strictly work focused. Like on my Insta story, of course, I still post like real life things, because I do think that's been a shift in social media where like people want to see artists as their real selves as well. Like they want to see your work, but they also want to see the trip you just went on or the book you're reading. Like they want to see that you're a human too. So I think that's kind of fun. So it's just learning like where that line is of like where showing too much, showing not enough. But I will say, and I feel like people don't expect this, but I get maybe 10% of my work from social media. Not a lot.
Wow.
Like when I look back through like, let's say my clients from, you know, last year as a whole, like maybe 2 or 3 projects total came from social media. And I think maybe it's just sort of the industry that I'm in. I would imagine for like wedding photographers, family photographers, children, that's coming a lot more from Instagram. But what I find really valuable with social media, and I say social media, but I really only use Instagram for my business. Like I have a TikTok, but I don't really post on it as much. I should probably be doing that. What was I going to say? Oh yeah. So it's a good, like, I really enjoy it for like connecting with people in my industry. So like colleagues, you know, like that's how I find models a lot of times. It's how I find stylists and hair and makeup and grips and stuff like that, and other photographers. So like really I look at Instagram as like, you know, almost just like my network of coworkers essentially, that, you know, I take a lot of inspiration from Instagram and just like, you know, complain with other photographers on Instagram, or just, you know, cheer each other on for posting like super rad work. But yeah, I don't get a ton of work from Instagram, and I think that's okay, because I don't think a lot of my clients are on Instagram. Honestly, my clients are on LinkedIn, which that's a whole nother video.
That makes me so happy though that you're leaning into the next question I was going to ask, which is about networking, because I don't think people talk about it, but it also was tied in with a question about finding work, and we're kind of answering multiple of these coming from Instagram. So it's a really good lead in for me, out of like this curiosity that I see from people that are searching into Google and are searching for videos to talk about how much is networking going to be important, and or how much do I need to be like putting myself on like places like Fiverr or these other freelance sites, you know? So I think I wasn't expecting to wander into that through Instagram, but I love that you're like, Instagram's a great place for me to be networking and finding models and learning and finding these things. So yeah, from there, just your general thoughts, and you could start with either one, whether it's talking just a little bit about your thoughts or impressions about the freelance space when it comes to people trying to go and hire and bid and compete against each other in that whole world that seems kind of overwhelming and crazy for me on the outside, versus the part about networking. It is, yeah. So
yeah. I heard this quote recently that your network is your net worth. And I was like, so true. Yeah. I mean, networking, I would say, obviously you need to be good at whatever you do, but I would contribute maybe more than half of my success to networking. Truly. Like, it's so valuable, and it sounds so cheesy. You know, it's like, oh,
I don't think so, actually. I'm gonna defend
people.
Yeah, I'm gonna defend you here. I think that like,
okay.
isn't this the lesson that you and I both have learned as entrepreneurs so far? I think, and I think it's something that a ton of people talk about, and some people don't talk. I think not enough people talk about it, because either it's like a sense of entitlement or shame or guilt or worry or intimidation from what it would look like for them to have to go out of their comfort zone to network. And at some point you have to actually face reality and say that like there is a system that is built off of networking, and whether or not that's fair, it is something that if we're trying to be good teachers and we're trying to give back and we're trying to elevate other voices and help other people pick up cameras and do things, then let's actually stop and have a real conversation about how more than half of jobs or half of things that you're going to be doing is because you're like trying to take care of and build a network, and let's not dodge it, right? So I actually commend you for sharing like that. That's more than half. And I think that like for you, I know that you're not somebody, at least in our relationship, has ever come across as like opportunistic or social climber. That's just not who you are. So I'm sure that you've had to like learn how to figure out like, how do I protect my integrity and be who I am, but also realize like, oh yeah, you have to do this networking thing, and it's got to be something that you still feel like you're balancing who you are and like the importance of building out a network so that you can continue to like, you know, increase your work.
Yeah. You know, like I would say like you have to just be kind of shameless about it, about putting yourself out there. And I think a lot of people are intimidated to just put themselves out there. And I think like, one, you have to actually believe you can make a difference for this client. You know, like I contribute. So when I went freelance, this is a kind of a separate story, but I literally left my full-time job March 2020 before the world shut down. So I was like, wow. Oh my gosh, like this is crazy. I did not
right then. Like I
did not plan that. I gave like a month and a half's notice in January, not knowing the world was going to shut down. So one, that was scary. But when I left, I cold emailed, I would say like 30 different agencies. So like ad agencies, creative agencies, just saying like, hey, this is who I am. Here's my work. This is what I'm good at. I think I could be an asset to, just like in a freelance perspective. And I got 2 emails back from the 30 I emailed. And so at first I was like, okay, not a lot of emails back, but we are in a pandemic. Like people aren't replying to cold emails a lot. One reply said, hey, we actually don't really work with photographers. Cool. Easy. The other one was Red Antler, which is like an ad agency giant. They're based out of New York. Like they do killer work. Like they work with Casper and Allbirds and Tinder and like all sorts of cool stuff. And they were the one person that replied. And like, that was my biggest like pie in the sky email that I sent. And they were like, wait, we love your work. We have a project we think you'd be great for. Are you free in 2 weeks? I was like, wow, are you kidding me? Yeah. And so like that project led to 2 more projects from that same client. And then it led to another project, later in the year. So like 30 emails, one really responded, but it led to like, maybe a third of my income last year or in 2020. So wow. You just
That's
never
incredible.
know. You just have to put yourself out there. Like I've sent so many shameless emails being like, hey, I think our vibes really go together. Like I think my work and your brand would be awesome together. And the trick is like, I really mean that, it's not like, I don't even feel like I'm selling them something because I really feel like I could help them.
Yeah.
And I think having that belief in yourself and your work makes it come across not like salesy and inauthentic.
Mm-hmm. So what I'm hearing is, you have to buy your own stock. You have to have confidence as an artist, and you have to learn how to shoot your shot and like just get shots up. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And you're gonna get shot down a lot.
That's such a cool story, and that's so crazy because my first interview with Jenna Potoko, who's the co-founder of Love Do Net in New York, they launched like February or January or March of that same year. So it's like you couldn't have picked a crazier time without knowing it. It's two entrepreneurs in a row who have both gone on to be successful. So I actually think that's like really inspiring to be able to share with people given the circumstances of when you started. So that's amazing. Thank you so much. So that's networking. Go ahead.
Yes. I was going to touch on sort of like your question about like different freelancer sites.
To the extent of your impressions or your experience or that what you want to say about it, just because I realize that that's a big thing, I think, for consumers now to be all the SEO, all the Google stuff is kicking them up to the front when I type in freelance photography, Yeah.
And I think it is something that feels like a good starting point for people when they're like, okay, I'm not getting any of my own clients. Like, where do I even start? Which I think leads to one of your questions about free work, which I would really like to touch on. I would say, there are options out there, putting yourself on these different sites. I would say most of them are garbage. Like, you are going to get paid pennies for your work. I got legitimately scammed from one of them. I almost got scammed out of $5,000.
Oh no.
And like, I know what I'm doing, and like, it was the most legitimate scam I've ever seen. So like, just be very careful. I would say the only one I've had a very positive experience with is one called Upwork.
Yep. Okay.
And that is a lot for photographers, other mediums as well. But that one feels like the most legitimate. I think you do have to pay for it, which feels a little bit better. And I actually have only ever got 2 jobs from that. I really don't use it anymore. I got 2 jobs from that. And one of these jobs led to actually that cannabis tech industry job. It wasn't on Upwork, but like I made a relationship with them through Upwork, and now we just continue to work together. So I would say, in the beginning, use it, but just be very careful.
I love that. Thank you so much. Okay. So, why don't we double back then real quick to just your thoughts in general, as far as working for free? That's something that I put into our questions because I'd seen some people talking about how they were big advocates of, at the very beginning of their career, doing some work for free.
Yeah, I am a huge advocate for it with some stipulations. I'm still an advocate for it. and it's not just about like, oh, I want to do a bunch of free work for clients, but it's doing work on your own that shows what you love to shoot and what you're really good at, you know? Like when I first started out, I did this sort of like challenge to myself, and I was like, I'm going to do a photo shoot a month, and it's going to be like of people I'm really inspired by and inspired by their story, but shoot it in a fashion way. And like the art direction is going to be inspired by each person in their story. And that, like, no one got paid. I didn't get paid. It just involved one model, no hair and makeup, no stylist, literally just like me, my vision, the model and their story. That's it. And like one of those photos got featured in Vogue Italia, you know, it's just like me shooting what I wanted to shoot because I wanted to shoot it, you know, and I still do shoots like that today. Like you can throw this photo up on the screen, but one of my favorite shoots of all time last year was I did this like fun collaboration with these 5 like vintage influencer models, and it's this just like 50s swim inspired shoot, and that shoot alone has led to maybe like 5 or 6 actual like paid gigs, and that was free. Like no one got paid. It's just like clients won't take a chance on a crazy vision if they've never seen you do something like that. So if you're like, oh, I really want to start shooting weddings, like ask if you can like tag along on someone's, you know, find a photographer you can mentor under, or ask to assist. Or, you know, I think a lot of times people, when they want to start shooting for free, they just like, oh my gosh, I just don't have like the money to hire models. Like find a friend that wants to get into modeling. Like find a makeup artist you want to collaborate with. I would just say start small and don't like try and put together like a 10-person crew. Like just you and your friend go out to the beach, or just ask people if you can shadow them for a day. Like it doesn't have to be this big production just to sort of like get your toes wet.
That's the heart of what I want people to get from interviews like this, right? Is pragmatic, realistic, small things that you might be able to do that, oh, hey, look, you actually have a portfolio now. Whether or not it's what you want it to be 10 years from now, it doesn't matter. You started and you got smart about how you could start without having some crazy budget or resources, right?
Yeah, exactly. Even if you wanted to get into product photography, I think that's one of the easiest things to potentially get into, because all you need to do is go buy a thing of like Glossier lipstick, go into your house, like find a sheet, or go to like Michael's and get like a piece of cool paper, mess around with that, use the sun as your light. Like you don't need fancy lighting. Like I said, the fancy stuff can come later when you need it, but like you can be really scrappy. And even though I'm a professional, I'm still so scrappy sometimes. Like you still have to have those skills of, you know, how to make things work for you, even when you're on a professional level.
Lauren, that was just like, I feel like our free homework assignment for anybody that is watching right now. Like go use the sun as your backlight, get a sheet from Michael's, do something small and cool and play.
Anyone can do that.
I'd love that. We only have 2 questions left. Can you believe that? 2 questions.
I can't believe that.
I wrote up like 38 questions for us, and the way that you've answered a lot of these, you've answered multiple ones, and it just makes me really happy. Okay, so
amazing.
This is one that I think is really important for me to ask as an entrepreneur, because none of the startups that I've done have yet, because we're both still early in our careers. So, you know, at some point you and I are going to be co-founders of something together. I just don't know what it is yet.
Yes, I'm waiting.
But all the startups that I've been involved with so far, none of them have predominantly asked me to also be an artist first. Right. And so what I think is interesting about that is there's a unique challenge that I haven't really been exposed to that you have, which is this duality and trying to find balance between, we've talked a lot about the art today, but we haven't talked as much about how much you might have had to teach yourself when it comes to business and putting a business hat on. So I just wanted you to speak a little bit to what that journey's been like for you and what you've learned as far as not only are you supposed to prioritize art, but you have to also be your own best, like, for your own protection and like, you know, for your own, where you want to be in life. Like you also have to be a business person. So I just wanted to hear you talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's such a great thing to talk about, just to set people's expectations appropriately. Like, I think I see those memes where it's like, what you actually do, what people think you do. Like, for example, what my week looks like this week. I have one shoot tomorrow, and the rest of this week is literally me sitting in front of my laptop and sending invoices to people, making sure I get paid, sending selects to clients, making sure, them picking their photos, sending proposals to future clients, like editing I'm just editing the rest of the week. So like, if you are okay with being in front of your computer more than you're in front of the camera, then this is a career for you. Like, I think more people need to talk about that. Like, yeah, you might only be picking up your camera and getting paid to hold your camera one day a week. Like, of course you can shoot other days of the week just for fun, but I think realistically, like, yeah, 1 to 2 shoots a week. Yeah, it's so, the business side is so much of it. Like, it really is, like, learning how to price yourself appropriately, like learning what you're worth, sending proposals, sending invoices, keeping track of like hundreds and thousands of files and all that sort of stuff. Like,
we had a whole other
taxes.
rabbit hole. I was gonna say, we had a whole other rabbit hole that we were gonna go down, that I didn't think was appropriate for beginners, where we were gonna talk about insurance and we were gonna talk about pricing, communicating your value, junior level, mid, basing your value off of your experience versus, just all of that stuff. But those resources are out there if you're watching this and you are more interested in that. There's some incredible resources. I'll put them in the link too, that specifically say, here's an episode just on how to price yourself.
We could do a part 2 one day.
Yeah, I'd love that. But I also love how we prioritize what we're doing now. So a lot of that, I assume, was a combination of self-taught, and then maybe whether it was I don't know how much your mom's experience was able to inform you, or working at the creative agency at Focus Lab, or what it was. But I imagine you kind of had to combine multiple things here to figure out, like, oh wait, I'm like my manager, like I'm like, I need to, in a way, like I need to be thinking about invoicing, like, like all those things are true. Like, I think I've learned tidbits from all of those different things, and I feel like I'm still learning so many things, learning like how to invoice people so that you don't get a percentage taken out of, so you get the full amount, and clients paying me so then I can go pay the models or pay the hair and makeup. Like, just all these like little ins and outs that you don't think about but are really important to your future success. Yeah, I'm annoying when it comes to that. And I mean, hopefully, like, annoying in a way that's endearing, of like wanting to remind people that they can be their best advocate when it comes to like financial literacy or self-discipline, and that the artist can live alongside that. It doesn't have to be, that an artist doesn't have those qualities. So,
and I think one day you can get to a level where someone else does that for you.
Absolutely.
I think like that's the goal. Like, you have a manager, you have an agent, someone like that. So I don't want you to think like, oh, no matter how successful you get, you still have to do it all. Like, I don't think that's the goal necessarily, but you can do it all.
You can do it all. And I think it's a good message to send to somebody that they're not somehow like killing the little artist inside them, or like poisoning the artist because they had to watch a video or download a document on how to do some like random tax thing. Like,
exactly.
It's tough and it's new and it might be a little bit complicated or uncomfortable. But so is a lot of the things that we pursue in life.
Exactly.
And,
it's just balance.
Yeah. Okay. So we have one last question, and it's my favorite question to ask. So are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, so this is really important to me because I've been very vocal about how I've dealt with anxiety and depression in my past, and I've had a lot of growth, specifically through therapy, but all different types of things that you start to learn in life. Like, oh my God, all these things that we're supposed to do as far as exercise and nutrition, and like, yeah. Oh wait, no, all this stuff does actually help us, especially
Don't you hate
entrepreneurs.
That? It actually all helps.
Yeah, especially entrepreneurs, I feel like, because we take on so much and we're always like looking to take on more. So it's a question that I feel like is really special for me to be able to ask another successful entrepreneur, as far as how you've learned at this point in your career to best value yourself, and manage, your mental health when it relates to your work?
Yeah, that's such an important question. And I feel like as a whole, we're starting to talk about that more, but we could always use more of it. I would say my biggest challenge that I also work through in therapy is not putting my value in my work. And it sounds like so simple, but it's really easy when I'm having a really good week or really good month with work. I'm just like, everything is so amazing. Like my relationships are great and life is so good and fun. But then I have a bad week where either, a job I was so excited about gets canceled for whatever reason. This happens so often. Like it's not personal. Like stuff just changes in our industry so quickly. So like not beating myself up for like, oh my gosh, like what if they found someone better? Or what if, they thought I couldn't pull it off. Like just not putting my value in my work. And as an artist, it's hard because it is so intertwined. Like as a creative, like, to me, creativity is the most important thing to me above my relationships, above anything else. Like I would not be me if I was not creative. So then when, you get bad feedback on something you did creatively, it's so hard not to take that as a personal attack, even though it's not. It's literally just business. And at the end of the day, I remind myself like, okay, I'm taking photos. I'm not saving the world. Like these photos are going on Instagram and a website. Like it's not that big of a deal. It's cool. Yes. But like no one's going to see these photos in a year, most likely. Like you have to like kind of humble yourself a little bit and be like, this is okay, and like having work that you make just for you that no one ever sees. And like for me, that's like painting and like film photography are things I do for me, for my like, creative soul and spirit that no one else sees, because if I make it with the intention of people seeing it, then I'm not doing it for the right reason. I'm just making it so I can get love and credit for it, so it's just me making things just for me. So it sort of keeps that perspective in check.
Yeah, I love that so much. I think that it's really brave, and I appreciate you being vulnerable and talking about that very specific thing that even if people hear about it a lot, because they're like, yeah, it's becoming way less taboo to talk about mental health and therapy. It's still like important to stop and really reflect on what we're talking about here, which is a lot of us that become entrepreneurs. And if you want to be an entrepreneur, you are an entrepreneur, watch this. A lot of us, whether or not we like it, are propelled to achieve things because our identity or our self-worth or our value often gets tied up in what we achieve. And we are going to have opportunities, and we have to make opportunities to be like, if all my art was gone or my businesses were gone or everything, could I still have love for myself? Could I still feel like I'm worthy?
It's a very important question to ask. And there were times, especially before therapy, before I got healthy, that was it. Like that was my worth, and now like I've built a life where I have a lot of other things that are important and aren't as fragile as a career. And yeah, like a career is fun and art's fun, but ultimately like you have to do things for you that make you happy, regardless of if anyone else likes them or not.
Yeah, next time we see each other, we're gonna toast a cocktail to us both having that similar experience, and it's a journey.
Yes.
It's you never want to sound like you're coming out of like some typical self-help book, not because you don't want to come across as cheesy, as much as I think that like when you're trying to be vulnerable and you're on a platform and you're talking to other people, you don't want their eyes to gloss over and feel like what you're saying they've already heard before, if that makes sense. And so, I'll sometimes catch myself and I'll be like, well, it's a journey. It's not about the destination. Like, well, actually, maybe sometimes it's good as artists to stop and think, like, is there another way that I can say what I'm trying to say, which is that if just today I'm able to take one just super small step to reminding myself of my value, not always related to these things, that like super small step I take is going to continue to add up. And that's what the past few years of, healing and a healthier lifestyle have been. And I feel like that's what you're saying as well, is that
I love that. That's great advice. The small step thing. I think that's spot on.
Yeah, I remember I was talking, this might not make our this might not make her YouTube, but maybe it will. But I was talking to my niece who I love, and they are in college, and they're stressing about so many things because you're in college and there's relationships and there's school, and it's just everything is like the biggest thing and what's going to happen and all of this living anywhere but the present, right? Should I have done this and what will I do? And I asked them, I was like, what would it feel like to just be able to magically like let go of all of that? And they're like, I'm like, describe it to me. And they were like, it would feel incredible. And I'm like, all right, well, you just kind of did that for yourself. Even if it was only 3 seconds, you were able to pretend. And that's the same thing, because in a moment there, you had let go of all of it. And if like, you can only do that for 3 seconds now, but you keep working on that, what could it mean a year, 2 years, 5 years of being able to continue to learn how to release yourself from the past in the future and be in the present? Anyway, I might now sound super self-helpy. I don't know.
No, but I mean, it's so true. It's so true, but it just doesn't sound true then. You know, it's just like, oh, but all my friends are going to this college and this matters and this matters. And like, I need to make these grades and I need to go to this college and I need to do this degree. And like, you know, you hear us, you know, several years out of college say like, oh, you don't even need to go to college for this, or I didn't go to college for what I'm working on. Like, it's just hard for it to matter then, you know. It's like you get it later, but it's hard to get it then.
I think the bridge that I'm hoping is a real bridge, and let me know what you think on this, because it's all part of the questions we're asking anyways, that I think a bridge that I see older people sometimes forget, or parents forget, is it's been too much time and they either can't or aren't willing to believe that they used to also be like that. And I am feeling really grateful that I can relate to my niece and be like,
totally.
No, I definitely was there. I definitely had the same strong concern. And because I feel like I can think that, I don't find myself being like the worst type of trap, which is like, I just don't know why they're like that, because I was never like that, or I never dealt with that, right? And so for you, me as entrepreneurs, having this conversation, right, having these conversations about mental health and about these things, and being able to look back and have empathy and compassion, because we know that like it's not like we magically just got to a place where we're feeling healthier. Like, we had to go through some dark places or some work, some of us, you know. So
yeah, exactly.
I didn't really expect to turn into there, but I think I might keep that because I really like that.
No, I really like that too. I think that's very helpful.
Lauren, we did it. So what I like to do now is I like to try to go back and say back to you some of your tips and advices as like a little cheat sheet,
a little
for the end of my
reading
videos.
comprehension.
It's stressful because you just get to sit there, you know, and assess. And it's like, have I actually been listening to you? Like,
yeah, I'm
right.
I'm ready to find out.
All right. So it might not be in like the right order, but that's okay. It doesn't matter.
That's okay. It matters.
Equipment. It's funny you say that. Actually, I have a tattoo that says "It matters."
Oh, that's perfect.
Okay, so equipment. Ideally, not a point and shoot, because you want to have at least some next level of complexity with how you can edit what you're doing with the camera, as far as aperture, and then what do we say when we're affecting how fast the camera is? I always forget these technical terms. There's like letting light in.
You took my photography class.
I know, but I haven't been shooting. You're letting light in, and then your shutter speed. Shutter speed.
There you go.
I got there. I got there without even like Googling or looking anything up.
Perfect.
And even if all you have right now is a smartphone, you might be surprised with the technical abilities that you could still play with lighting on a camera. Even if it's not the same, it can at least get you started towards understanding. But you might be able to borrow a camera. There's all different things you might be able to do. So, but don't think you need to be investing in some crazy lens and crazy high tech camera.
Yep, nailed it.
Okay. If you were talking to the younger version of you, you'd be like, listen, I know that your mom does this and you don't want to do it, but just keep an open mind. Keep an open mind that there is no time limit in life on finding your passion, which might be my favorite thing that you said the whole interview.
Love it.
Right? I'm paraphrasing, but like, there's always time where you might be surprised that you at what really like brings your heart alive and what activates you, which I really like that. This is obviously not in order because we jumped around, but we talked about freelance sites. They're competitive. You have to be cautious because it's possible to get scammed, to not get paid enough. You've had at least a good experience with Upwork, so we'll give them one little shout out, but be cautious, be careful about how you work with those. We talked about making a leap full-time and saying it really is great if you have a 9 to 5, especially if it's in the industry that you're interested in and you can be networking, and building yourself up, building up a portfolio before you make that leap. And when we talked about education, college doesn't have to be a necessity. And we know that we're living through an insane time when it comes to the price of college relative to what the price of college would have been for our parents. We don't talk about it enough, but it is actually insane how much the price changed between a couple generations. So don't think that college has to be a prereq for learning. And I love one of the things you said about that. There's stuff that you would have studied in college that would now not even be a thing that's being used, or style that would be happening with your clients. So how are we doing so far, by the way? We're good?
You're doing great. No
Okay.
notes.
All right. Great. Instagram's been really great because you can find so much inspiration, and we're going to reshare those as I'm talking now, so you can see them, find the links of some of Lauren's favorite accounts and favorite artists that will be on here, but can also be good for networking, for reaching out, talking about potentially trying to see if you can find a model, if you might find more work. It's a place that everybody spends a significant amount of time on, and it doesn't have to be just thought of as something that extends your brand or your portfolio. There's all this other opportunity to use Instagram for. I really like that we talked about videography, and you were able to come in and say, like, listen, it's okay if you know you don't like that, that's not something that you want to do or you love, and you have somebody you can refer that work to. You don't always have to do both, right? Which I thought was a really good lesson to say, and that they aren't as easily interchangeable in the way that you set them up and work them. We talked about how you're not compromising like the artist inside of Lauren Jones by also learning how tax law and insurance and invoicing works. It might be tedious, but you didn't like magically like lose any of your inner artist self by like figuring out the business self.
Exactly. It's worth it still.
We talked about finding what your voice is and what it is that you really like to do, and not compromising on that, and that you can do this really cool thing. This is one of my favorite things that we talked about. As you're learning like what your style is and what you know you're doing well, or what you know you get excited to do, you hone in on that, and you don't worry as much about what the actual product or event or job requirement is. You try to find more of somebody that understands you as an artist and says, yeah, actually, we would be happy to give you autonomy over the style because you're the artist. Like, we want you to have the style. We're just excited that you can bring your style to what we're booking you for. And that has allowed you to work on all types of projects, products, companies that you might have never thought that you'd been able to. And I just really like that as a message. I think that we are running out of the things here. We talked about mental health, which is something that I think is really important to me. And we talked about, God, I love this. We talked about how even now, as somebody that you consider yourself healthier than you've ever been, and you realize now how important it is for you to remind yourself that whether or not your work is validated, continually should not inform your self-worth and how you feel about yourself as an artist, and that there's actually really great tools for you that you found in your life that are really good outlets, whether it's painting, right? Or doing actual film, like you're actually doing the whole thing in like the back room. Like, what's it called when you're like,
not the dark room.
Not dark room. That's in my mind. That's what I was imagining.
I have done that before, and
crazy.
It's so fun. It's like meditative and therapeutic. So that's not off the table.
But you are shooting on film for fun.
Shooting film. I just get someone else to develop it for me.
That's really cool. Yeah. So we might have skipped over some of the bigger ones, but I think that I gave a pretty good comprehensive cheat sheet.
No, you nailed it. A+.
Awesome. I love that. Believe in your work.
Now they can just skip to the very end. Listen to your cliff notes.
Networking is easier if you believe in your work. You actually believe it, because then when you're shooting your shot, it's not desperate. It's not weird.
Yep.
It's like coming with like a confidence of like, nah, I could make this better. And sometimes you'll shoot 30 emails out and you'll only get one, but that one could be life-changing. Lauren Jones, We did it. We like gamed out your industry.
Thank you.
We talked about what you've learned so far. We could talk so much longer, but I love what we were able to accomplish.
Absolutely. No, I'm so glad that you're doing this. This is really important, and I'm happy to be part of it.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you.
There are incredible opportunities for people to get involved in certain industries, and for people like you to stop and take some time to say, here's how I would try to start out, is immensely valuable. And the fact that people can watch this for free, I think is really great. So thank you so much for being on here. We're going to have your Instagram tag on here, which actually is it just, what is your Instagram tag?
It's Lauren Jones.
Lauren Jones, right? It's so easy. So it's Lauren Jones. Follow her, support her art, and thank you so much for recording some time with us.
Thanks for having me. This is so fun.
Yes, until next time.